Hello and welcome to Finish in 5 on Macbeth. This is the 5th of 5 videos. Each one covers an important moment in the play with a key extract and looks at what happens before the extract, during the extract and after it and why it's significant. And the idea is that by covering those 5 key moments, you are essentially covering the entire narrative of the play. So let's start by summarising what's happened so far. And obviously at this point, it's most of the play. So at the start of the play, Macbeth was given a set of prophecies by some witches, including that he would become king, but also that his best friend Banquo's descendants would become kings. Macbeth and his wife, Lady Macbeth, conspired to murder King Duncan. Macbeth then framed Duncan's guards, and Duncan's heir, his son Malcolm, fled to England. Macbeth became king. Paranoid about Banquo, Macbeth had him murdered, but Banquo's son escaped. Macbeth revisited the witches and was told that he couldn't be killed by anyone born of woman. However, he was also told that Macduff was someone he should fear, and that Macduff had gone to join Malcolm. Furious, Macbeth ordered the murders of Macduff's family. Macduff and Malcolm led an English army, joined by the Scottish thanes, to attack Macbeth's castle. Lady Macbeth, consumed by guilt, killed herself, leaving Macbeth all but alone when his castle was attacked. So in terms of this extract, now what we're going to see is Macbeth refusing to surrender and intending to fight. Macduff then catches up with Macbeth, eager for revenge for the deaths of his family. Macbeth, guilty, attempts to avoid fighting him, but Macduff refuses to back down. Macbeth then tells Macduff to give up, that Macbeth can't be killed by anyone born of a woman, only for Macduff to reveal that he was ripped from his mother's womb. Macbeth attempts to surrender, and he realises that he's been misled by listening to the witches. Macduff then threatens to display Macbeth to the public, humiliating him, and Macbeth decides to fight to the last, even if he's going to die. Macbeth Extract 5, this is from Act 5, Scene 8, and it's Macbeth and Macduff. Why should I play the Roman fool and die on my own sword? Once I see lives, the gashes do better upon them. Turn, hellhound, turn! Of all men else I have avoided thee, but get thee back. My soul's too much charged with blood of thine already. I have no words. My voice is in my sword, thou bloodier villain than terms can give thee out. Thou losest labour. As easy mayst thou the entrenchant air with thy keen sword impress as make me bleed. Let fall thy blade on vulnerable crests. I bear a charmed life which must not yield to one of woman born. Despair thy charm, and let the angel whom thou still hast served tell thee. Macduff was from his mother's womb untimely ripped. Accursed be the tongue that tells me so, for it hath cowed my better part of man, and be these juggling fiends no more believed, that palter with us in a double sense, that keep the word of promise to our ear and break it to our hope. I'll not fight with thee. Then yield thee, coward, and live to be the show and gaze of the time. We'll have thee as our rare monsters are painted upon a pole, and under it, here may you see the tyrants. I'll not yield to kiss the ground beneath young Malcolm's feet, and to be baited with the rabble's curse. Though Burnham would be come to Dunsinane, and thou opposed being of no woman born, yet I will try the last. Before my body I throw my warlike shield. Lay on, Macduff, and damned be he that first cries hold, enough. Right, let's dissect the extract a bit. Now, as in the rest of the play, Macbeth sees violence here as his go-to response. While he's alive and there are soldiers facing him, the gashes do better upon them. Macduff's order to Macbeth to turn, hellhound, turn shows Macduff being empowered by righteous rage, but also his link between Macbeth and hell, a reference to how far Macbeth has fallen, and also linking Macbeth to being a dog, something deeply insulting, even if it is a hellhound. Now Macbeth, to his credit, attempts to avoid fighting Macduff, acknowledging that his soul is too much charged with blood of thine already, that he already has blood, that recurring symbol of guilt, on his soul, with charged suggesting loaded with or accused with. It's noticeable that Macbeth has gone from the man of action at the start of the play to a talker at the end. Macduff has done the reverse. My voice is in my sword, insists Macduff, now the man of action, since there are no words strong enough for Macbeth, since he is a bloodier villain than terms can give thee out. Blood again. Macbeth, overconfident from his earlier encounter with the witches and with their masters, boasts to Macduff that his efforts are pointless, since Macbeth bears a charmed life which must not yield to one of woman born. Macduff correctly makes the link to the origins of Macbeth's sins, the angel whom thou still hast served, meaning here a fallen angel, a devil. The brutality of the language is continued in Macduff's phrasing, here that he was ripped from his mother's womb. Macbeth almost instantly retreats into fear, a clear contrast with his heroism in the battle at the start that bookends the play, those two battles at the start and at the end. Here, Macduff's revelation has cowed my better part of man, with Macbeth realising that he cannot trust these juggling fiends. Those are the witches and the demons that they summoned. Instead, Macbeth attempts to insist that I'll not fight with thee, and again notice the change from Macbeth back in Act 1, Scene 2. Macduff's threat is essentially about humiliating Macbeth, and it's a similar line to that taken by Lady Macbeth back in Act 1, Scene 7, and in Act 2, Scene 2, that Macbeth is a coward. Even more, Macduff threatens to display him in a kind of circus, where Macbeth can be the show and gaze of the time, with a sign outside advertising him by saying, "Here may you see the tyrant." For Macbeth, the man obsessed by reputation, by his status, it's a humiliation too far to face. Instead, Macbeth decides that he will not yield to kiss the ground beneath young Malcolm's feet, an image of subservience. Instead, despite now knowing that he can be defeated, since the forest has come to his castle, despite knowing that he can die because of Macduff's birth, Macbeth decides to fight to the end. He throws his warlike shield before himself, with a final cry of, "Damned be he that first cries hold enough," which essentially means, to hell with whichever of us tries to surrender. Now, despite his crimes and his myriad faults, Macbeth dies as something approaching the brave, heroic soldier he was at the beginning of the play. It's a tiny redemption, but it is there. Now, in terms of what happens in the remainder of the play, well, Macbeth and Macduff exit the stage fighting, and Macbeth dies off stage. A few reasons for that, don't forget. One thing, it's difficult to show on stage, and also there were all sorts of problems with showing the deaths of kings and queens on stage, from a legal point of view, at the time that Shakespeare was writing. Macduff then delivers Macbeth's severed head to Malcolm. That's an ironic mirror, of course, of Macbeth's own treatment of the traitor MacDonald at the start of the play. Malcolm claims the throne and promises peace and rewards to those who served him, dismissing Macbeth and Lady Macbeth as this dead butcher and his fiend-like queen. And the play ends. Right, and for the final time, just a list of resources that you have got access to as well when you're revising for this play. There's, of course, the excellent work in the recipe book. There's a whole load of stuff in there. And if you look at the contents page at the start, you'll see a list of all the things you can use to revise from there. There are the quotation cards that you were given earlier in the year, but most schools have got spare copies of them, so if you haven't got them, please do ask your teacher. There is, of course, the CGP study guide you were given, again, earlier in the year. There is the quotation of the day that goes out on our Twitter feed, which is at @net_English_. And most of all, there are several hundred videos on the YouTube channel, which is Net English 1, including, I think, about 50 or so on Macbeth, covering characters, covering narrative, covering quotations. There's a lot of useful stuff on there. Right, and that's the end of this fifth and final video on Macbeth from the Finished in 5. If you are looking to revise some of the other texts, there are also Finished in 5s on, say, for example, Christmas Carol, that's there already, and Inspector Calls, and so on. So it is worth nipping onto, if you haven't already, the YouTube channel, Net English 1, and you can find all of those resources there. Thanks for listening, and take care.